Subscribe to our YouTube channel and press the bell icon to never miss an update from RAU'S.
Hello and welcome to Daily News Simplified, an answer to what, why and how of newspaper analysis from the perspective of UPSC examination. Today we are going to discuss Delhi edition of The Hindu newspaper dated 19th of September 2020. The articles which we are going to cover today are displayed on the screen. Let's now begin the discussion. Dear Civil Services aspirants, it is clear that 4th October is the date for the Civil Services Prelims examination. We at RAU'S believe that you are well prepared to give your best and clear the prelims exam with ease. Right now, the most important thing that you must do is to practice few more mock tests, and the purpose of these mocks is two-pronged. One is to keep your nerves under control during the exam, and the second one is to revise as much as possible in these last 10 to 15 days. And in order to help you achieve these goals, we have initiated the Pre-Parikshan program just for you. There will be 2 full-length tests that will help you test yourself on 200 most important themes of the last 1 year. So what are you waiting for? The registration link is in the description given below. Register yourself on our ELEARN platform and appear for these tests for free of cost. The first test will be live tomorrow, that is on 20th of September at 12 p.m. The result will be published on 21st September 2 p.m. Before we begin the discussion, there is a good news for all of you. As per your requests, we have provided you the list of articles from May 2019 to September 2020 in a form of PDF, the link for which can be found in the description of today's DNS. Please focus your attention towards these statements which are on your screen. Through this discussion, you will know whether these statements are true or false. Statement 1. Currently, AFSPA is operational in Assam and Nagaland only. AFSPA can be withdrawn by state government only. WebofSummit is being organized by Ministry of External Affairs. Collections from GST has steadily decreased in past 2 years. IGST has the highest component in overall GST revenues. Farm loan waivers lead to the reduction in NPAs. Tax revenue as a percentage of GDP of India has steadily increased in the last decade. Fiscal deficit as percentage of GDP of India has steadily increased in last decade. Bamboos are the tallest grasses. Depsang lies south of Galwan Valley. Focus on the discussion so that you are able to score maximum on these true-false statements, although the answers have been given at the end. The first news which we have taken for discussion is powers under AFSPA exceeded in Shopian appears on page number 11. So Army yesterday has said that it has concluded an inquiry ordered into the Shopian encounter of July 18 and suggested that the powers vested under Armed Force Special Powers Act or AFSPA were exceeded during the operation. So the Army spokesperson stated that during the operation, the powers vested under AFSPA 1990 were exceeded and the do's and don'ts of Chief of Army Staff as approved by Supreme Court have been contravened. AFSPA or Armed Forces Special Powers Act is one such legislation which appears in newspaper very frequently. On one hand, people suggest that it is very important for maintenance of law and order and controlling of insurgency in various parts of our country. On the other hand, human rights activists and civic society movements have cropped up which enumerate a lot of loopholes in this particular legislation, and hence in this regard it becomes very important for us to discuss various provisions of AFSPA, why it was legislated and why it is needed even now, and what are the issues which should be dealt with to make this particular legislation more robust. It gets covered not only in GS3 under security, but it also gets covered under GS2. Also, it is very important from the perspective of GS4 or ethics paper. So let us now begin the discussion by first looking at the actual provisions of AFSPA Act. So as you can see on the screen is the actual PDF or the Act, Armed Force Special Powers Act 1958. Now the Act in its totality is very simple, and it's only 1.5 pages long and has 6 sections. So the first line of the Act itself says an act to enable certain special powers to be conferred upon members of armed forces in disturbed areas in states of, and it mentions various states, of course, which keeps on changing from time to time depending upon the notifications. Section 2 of the Act gives out 2 important definitions. First is armed forces and second is disturbed areas. Now according to the Act, armed forces means the military forces and the air forces operating as land forces, and includes any other armed forces of the Union so operating. So armed forces does not only includes military, but it also includes air forces if they help the land forces, and it also includes all other central paramilitary forces and any other forces of the Union. As far as disturbed areas are concerned, any area shall be considered as disturbed area under AFSPA, which is for the time being declared by notification under Section 3 to be disturbed area. So we'll come to the Section 3, but any area declared under Section 3 to be disturbed area shall be considered as disturbed area. Now let us see what Section 3 has to say. The title of the Section 3 is Power to Declare Areas to be Disturbed Areas. So Section 3 says if in relation to any state or union territory to which this act extends, the governor of the state or the administrator of that union territory or the central government. So if the governor feels that a particular area is creating problems, or even if the central government feels that the particular area is going through law and order issues, and if either of them feels that the use of armed forces in the aid of civil power is necessary, the governor of the state or administrator in case of union territories or even the central government may by notification in the official gazette declare the whole or part of state or union territory to be a disturbed area. So now you can see that both governor as well as central government has the power to declare an area as disturbed area. And what is the basic condition? The basic condition is that the area should be in such a dangerous condition that normal civilian government operation has become ineffective. It has become necessary to use armed force to support the civil power. And then that area is declared as disturbed area. So far it is clear how an area is declared as a disturbed area, but what implications does the declaration have on overall power balance? And that is determined by Section 4, Special Powers of the Armed Forces. And that is what the objective of the whole act is, because it is named as Armed Forces Special Powers Act. So what are the powers of the armed forces once an area is declared as disturbed area under AFSPA? Section 4 uses very convoluted language, but let us just focus on the shaded lines. Any commissioned officer or non-commissioned officer can fire upon, even to causing of death, against any person who is acting in contravention of any law or order for the time being in force in the disturbed area. So if you have to write points or the provisions of AFSPA in mains examination, summary of clause 4A would be armed forces and their officers become empowered to use force even to causing of death against any person who is acting in contravention of any law or order. Then clause 4B empowers the officers of armed forces to destroy any arms dump or any other fortified position or any other shelter from which armed attacks are made or likely to be made. So this gives power to the armed forces to destroy any kind of shelter or home which they think might be used by the terrorists or insurgents. Then clause 4C gives powers to the officers of armed forces to arrest without any warrant any person who has committed a cognizable offense or against whom a reasonable suspicion exists that he has committed or is about to commit a cognizable offense. Now this, you should note, is not a preventive detention law. But still, it gives powers to the armed forces to arrest a person or detain a person if they think has committed a crime or is in near future is about to commit a crime in the perception of the armed forces. Now these are very wide powers. Then finally, clause 4D empowers the armed forces to enter and search without warrant any premises. So these are the four powers which have been given to the armed forces through AFSPA. Let us now look at the two remaining sections. Then section 5 of this act provides some kind of protection to the aggrieved party. It says any person arrested and taken into custody under this act shall be made over to the officer in charge of the nearest police station with the least possible delay. Now this is also one of the biggest problem because it does not specifies the number of the days in which armed forces have to hand over the arrested person to the local police. It just says that they have to hand over the arrested person to the local police station with the least possible delay, and in the language of law this is very vague. And then finally, section 6 has created a lot of flutter in last 2 to 3 decades is the protection to persons acting under act. This particular section gives complete immunity to the persons or the officers acting under the provision of AFSPA. No prosecution or any other legal proceeding shall be instituted except with the previous sanction of the central government against any person in respect of anything done or purported to be done in exercise of the powers conferred by this act. So a personnel of armed forces, if he or she carries out any act of violence or anything in disturbed area, he or she shall not be prosecuted except with the previous sanction of the central government. And the article which appears in the newspaper today is exactly with respect to the section 6 of AFSPA. Now in this case, Army itself has said that we are going to start or initiate proceedings against officers who were involved in an encounter killing in Shopian district of Kashmir. And now this is the previous sanction of the central government, since the Army itself has initiated the proceedings, and now those officers who carried out the fake encounter shall be tried. But so far, no police case could be filed against Army officials because they were acting under the provisions of the AFSPA and they were protected by section 6 of this particular act. So for the sake of convenience, we have given out the provisions of the AFSPA in the screenshots as well. It talks about disturbed areas, it defines them, and then it also talks about the power of declaration of disturbed areas. As far as special powers to armed forces are concerned, they are 4 and they are mainly dealt with in section 4 of the act. Use of force and fire, destruction of shelter, arrest without warrant, and enter and search without warrant are 4 powers which have been given to armed forces. And then of course, protection to persons acting under the act. Now the question arises that India is a democratic country, and why was the need felt to create such an act which according to a lot of people is draconian? Why was in a country like India such a legislation was created? Now you should focus that since independence, India has seen a history of insurgency in the states. For example, starting with the northeast and as recent as in Kashmir, in 90s in Punjab, and each of these states is in the region that borders either Pakistan or China, which means that these insurgent or terrorist movements get support of another state. So if you recall your GS3 syllabus, state and non-state act. So these insurgent movements have gotten support from very powerful regional forces. And hence, in order to counter these two kinds of phenomena, you need very special provisions in disturbed areas. Also, if you want to deploy army in the aid and assistance of civil power, army also needs policing powers, which includes arrest, search, and seizure, which have been given through AFSPA. So this is the justification which has been used behind the enactment of AFSPA. So just like any other topic you prepare for mains examination, you also have to be aware about the arguments for and arguments against AFSPA. which will come very handy when you will either analyze, critically analyze or discuss the provisions of AFSPA. Let us start by first discussing the arguments which will demonstrate the need of enact something like AFSPA. So 3 points which we have taken already are the need or the justification will also appear in arguments for. Then all those people who allege that AFSPA is inhuman or it violates human rights or it is against the provisions of the Constitution should know that AFSPA has already been upheld by the Supreme Court. You should know that Article 21, Protection of Life and Personal Liberty, says that no person shall be deprived of his or her life or personal liberty except according to procedures established by law. And since AFSPA has been enacted by the Parliament, the taking away of life of a person by an official or the official of armed forces is a procedure which has been established by law and hence it is not constitutional. And Supreme Court also issued guidelines which were to be followed in disturbed areas. Also you should know that India is fighting a proxy war and hence therefore AFSPA enables the security forces to fight both external and externally helped forces that threaten not only the security of the state but also of the country. At the same time, you should also know that insurgents resort to force and violence to diminish the authority of Indian state and hence it is important to counter force by force, otherwise we will not be able to subdue the forces which are inimical to the Constitution of India. Also, the insurgent groups and terrorists use local civilian population as shields. And if the armed forces are not given such wide powers to pursue them to enter into any premises, military forces will find it very difficult to control the insurgent movements. And hence the kind of threats present in disturbed areas might lead to diminishing of morale of security forces. And hence it is very important to empower the members of the armed forces who constantly face threat to their lives at the hands of these terrorists and insurgents. And hence in order to enable them to feel confident and to take proper action, it is important that they be provided with the kind of impunity Section 6 of AFSPA provides. So these are the arguments in favor of AFSPA. Let us now look at the detractors and their arguments. First and foremost, argument used against AFSPA deals with the effectiveness of this particular act. You see, it was enacted around 50 years ago. And in most of the areas where it has been used to control insurgency movements are still facing the threats of insurgency, and these areas are still not normalized because you have to understand that the problems of insurgency occur due to political reasons and it becomes very difficult to control them through army actions or army-like tactics. And hence, the detractors argue that effectiveness of AFSPA is very low given the fact that even after 50 years in existence, most of the areas under AFSPA are still plaguing with violence. Then the next set of criticisms comes from the committee which have been set up by the government itself. You should try to keep these committees in mind. Justice Verma Committee, Santosh Hegde Committee and Jeevan Reddy Committee. All these committees were set up to investigate the allegations of human rights violations in disturbed areas by armed forces. While Justice Verma Committee dealt with offences against women in conflict areas, said AFSPA legitimizes impunity for sexual violence. Justice Hegde Committee was formed to investigate fake encounters in Manipur and described AFSPA as a symbol of oppression, and Jeevan Reddy Committee recommended removal of absolute immunity, that is, you should remember Section 6 of the Act under AFSPA. So the opposers of AFSPA cite reports of these three committees to argue against AFSPA. And such abuse of power on the hands of security forces diminishes the credibility of our democratic system. More such human rights violations further alienate the local population, and the whole purpose of application of AFSPA is defeated because in the first place AFSPA was applied to restore peace and law and order in a region so that local population could be integrated with the Indian Union. Then the last issue which we are going to discuss with AFSPA deals with the legal aspect of it. Now if you remember, we just discussed that Supreme Court has upheld the constitutional validity of AFSPA, saying that it has been enacted by procedures established by law, and hence it is not a violation of Article 21. But you should remember that in 1978, in Maneka Gandhi case, the Supreme Court ruled that procedures established by law is not sufficient. On top of that, that law should be fair, just and reasonable. This judgment was given in 1978. And hence the section 4A of AFSPA, which grants armed forces personnel the power to shoot to kill, the constitutional right to life is violated because although it is a procedure established by law, but it is nowhere fair, just and even reasonable to give armed forces such wide powers. And then the second deals with the violation of Article 22. Now you should know that Article 22 deals with the detention, and it also deals with the provisions of preventive detention. And it says that a person can be preventively detained only if he or she is an enemy alien, or that person is being detained under the provisions of preventive detention law. Now AFSPA is not a preventive detention law, but still it provides for detaining a person just on suspicion of him or her carrying out any crime in near future, and hence it is a violation of both Article 22 as well as Article 21. From the perspective of prelims examination, it is also important to keep in mind which are the state or the areas where AFSPA is currently applied. Now it is your job to find out those states where AFSPA is in application currently. Let us know in the comment section. Let's now move on to the next news. Next news article appears on page number 5, where High Court has asked how many farmers have been benefited from farm loan waivers given by the state government. Now this deals with a particular state government, but nonetheless a lot of state governments in past 5 to 10 years have provided regular farm loan waivers to the farmers. And hence in this regard it becomes very important for us to first understand the need for farm loan waiver, what farm loan waiver actually is, and to go through the merits as well as demerits of farm loan waiver schemes. As far as UPSC syllabus is concerned, it directly gets covered in GS3, the lines of the syllabus which deals with the agriculture. Now before going into what the farm loan waiver is, we first need to understand why farmer requires a loan to start with. And for that, you need to understand the period of time starting with sowing and ending at harvesting, and what kind of troubles which a farmer goes through. That will enable you to better understand not only the problems and the challenges faced by farmers, but also the need for loan waiver. We know that agricultural season starts with sowing or a little bit before sowing, and it almost ends at the harvesting time. Just before the sowing, farmer needs money or capital in order to invest in his or her agriculture, as well as to accumulate the inputs, some of which you can easily think of, like seeds and fertilizers. As far as capital investments are concerned, they are investments which will go a long way in increasing the productivity of the farmer. For example, investment in mechanization, or for example buying a tractor, or leveling of a land. If the land is not leveled, the distribution of the resources, especially water, is uneven across the field, which reduces the productivity of the field, and hence such kinds of investments are needed on a regular basis. Also, investment on inputs are needed just before every crop cycle. Once the crop is grown and before the crop is harvested, there are a lot of factors which require regular intervention in the field. For example, agricultural extension services are required. So agriculture extension or the services of agriculture extension deal with the application of scientific knowledge and technology in the field. So you can say that they are lab to land methods. They go a long way in ensuring the productivity and efficiency of the farmers, and they are very much needed. Then continuous irrigation is needed. And you know that a lot of, or the majority of area in our country is unirrigated. Let us know in the comment section currently what is the ratio of our overall net sown area which is under irrigation. Then we know that land reforms have not been carried out, especially dealing with the consolidation of the land, which has rendered the plot size in our country very fragmented, and hence all of these in together mean that the productivity of agriculture sector is very low. Lack of agriculture extension means that the farmers do not have access to the latest technology and scientific advancements which could deal with the latest seed variety. Lack of irrigation means that once a crop has been sowed, regular replenishment of water is not enabled, and lack of land reform means small and economically unviable plot sizes. Apart from that, erratic monsoons create a lot of problems, especially in unirrigated regions. On top of that, we have disasters like floods, cyclones, pest attacks, and also in some cases hailstorms. Why we have written these factors in between sowing and harvesting is because they continuously make the job of farmer extremely risky. And there is not just one parameter but a plethora of factors which govern the overall profitability of agriculture. And finally, even if all these factors go into the favor of farmer, let's say the monsoon was not erratic and there was no disaster in the current season, and even if the irrigation was enabled, then also the constraint posed by the way agricultural produce is marketed in our country ensures that most of the farmers are not able to derive profits, and more often than not, even for the personal expenses, they have to take loan. Since agriculture in our country is economically unviable, it becomes necessary for most farmers to arrange capital for the next growing season, for which they have to buy seeds and fertilizers and they have to invest in capital assets. Now, a farmer in the village has two options. First is informal sector, or you can say a local money lender. Now, if you have not gone to villages but you have watched Bollywood movies, you must know that this is a very exploitative relationship. The rates of interest are exorbitant, and hence, once a farmer takes a loan from a local money lender, it becomes very difficult for him or her to extricate himself from the clutches of money lender. Farmers have another option as well, and that is taking loan from the formal sector or from the banks, which you call as institutional credit, which is regulated, and the rates of lending are governed by the government. But here also there is a problem, and these are regulated sectors. There are a lot of formalities which a farmer has to go through, like paperwork, requirement of collateral, and it makes it very difficult for a farmer, and especially a tenant farmer which do not have any kind of land records, to get credit from the banks, and hence ultimately most of them have no other option but to fall into the trap of money lenders. But from time to time, government has come up with various kinds of schemes to ensure the free and steady flow of credit to the farmers. But due to the peculiar circumstances in which Indian agriculture operates, more often than not, these farmers are not able to repay their loans, and hence you see demands for loan waivers. Now, if you have to define loan waivers in single line, it is the taking over of the liability of the farmers by the government. So you can understand it by banks give loans to farmers, and then farmers have to repay those loans to the banks. Now, since farmers are unable to repay the loans, the government intervenes and takes care of the loans taken by the farmers. All the liability which the farmers have are taken over by the government. Now, this is beneficial for two reasons. First is that farm loans are waived off, and hence this leads to massive reduction in the liability of the farmers. And then at the same time, it also leads to the reduction in NPA of the banks. But of course, it has a downside as it leads to increase in the expenditure of the government. Now, just like any other government's policy intervention, it has merits as well as demerits. Now, we want you to think over the merits, and we will just provide you with the demerits of farm loan waivers. Now let us know in the comment section other benefits apart from the two which we have discussed. Now first and foremost is that large number of farmers are not getting the benefits of these waivers. And almost all the farm loan waivers are actually helping relatively better off farmers. Because you should understand that in our country, most of the farmers are actually tenants and they get no help from the formal banking sector as they do not have access to formal credit as we have understood earlier. Because they do not have any collaterals, so they don't get any loans from the banks, and hence they are not the beneficiaries of the farm loan waivers. They largely depend upon the informal sector for loans, and hence waiving of farm loans is making the rich richer because most of the farm loans have been actually taken by the well-off farmers, and hence it is like increasing the inequality in the rural scene. A study by AFSPA revealed that at national level, 48% of agricultural households do not avail a loan from any kind of source. And out of all those people who avail any kind of credit, 36% take credit from informal sources, especially from money lenders who charge very high rates of interest. So this is a kind of scenario which has been substantiated by survey as well. In the farm loan waiver, only those loans which were taken as a crop loans are waived, and not all kinds of loans like term loans and non-agricultural loans are not waived off. And farmers frequently take various other kinds of loans because their savings are usually invested in agriculture, and hence to meet other kinds of ends they take term loans, but they are not waived off. Also, farm loan waiver is a very convenient political move, but in the long term if you see, it is not going to address any long lasting issue of Indian agriculture, whether structural or institutional. Frequent farm loan waiver erodes the culture of loan repayments. It creates a behavioral problem because if farm loan waivers are given frequently, people who have the capacity to pay will not pay, and then it also discourages all those who had paid their loans on time. And then finally it creates large financial burden on state resources. Now Center has already made it clear that it is not going to help any of the states in their farm loan waivers, but frequent resort to such waivers by the state government has definitely had its implications on the fiscal responsibility in our country. So this is it as far as farm loan waivers are concerned. Do think about merits and let us know. Vaibhav to be held online from October 2 appears on page number 11. A summit known by the name of WebofSummit is going to be organized by various academic institutions across the country, focusing on the growth of research and innovation in our country. Now Vaibhav is an acronym for Vaishvik Bharatiya Vaigyanik, or translated into English as Global Indian Scientists. In order to understand the aims and objectives, or you can say what government is trying to achieve through this summit, we should first understand the role which Indian diaspora plays in global research and technology. Now this data which we are going to discuss has been given by the government. More than 5,500 Indians are employed in world global top 500 educational institutions, which means that they are not only good academicians but they are also very good researchers, and that is why they are well placed in world's top 500 educational institutions. Apart from that, more than 600 Indians are placed in top echelons of most renowned research and development institutes. Being Indians, they have emotional connect with India, and now due to their hard work and intelligence, they have gained global experience and they are world leaders. Now the government has thought to utilize these two traits being possessed by Indian academicians doing good in global arena. And what they have decided is that it's time now to bring these global Indian scientists to help Indian academicians in order to solve current Indian problems. So if you look at the current scenario, India has declared Atmanirbhar Bharat as driving mantra for achieving sustainable and unfettered growth of the nation. Now, as a part of Atmanirbhar Bharat, we will have to design ways and policies to solve multiple emerging challenges, which are climate change, renewable energy, infrastructural challenges, as well as medicines currently being highlighted due to COVID-19 pandemic. And for that, WebofSummit has been envisioned as a platform which will provide this much needed interaction between the global Indian scientists and Indian scientists or Indian global scientists. So as you can see, Vaishvik Bharatiya Vaigyanik or Global Indian Scientists is a platform to bring global Indians belonging to science, engineering and academics to collaborate with Indians to solve emerging problems. This is not being organized by any particular ministry. Rather, each of the specialized fields have been allocated to a set of institutions. And let's see a demonstration to understand. So as you can see that this is the home page of Vaibhav or Vaishvik Bharatiya Vaigyanik Summit, and you can see that there are various kinds of verticals: quantum technology, computational science, energy, data science, artificial intelligence, photonics, advanced manufacturing technologies, agroeconomy and food security. And if you click any one of them, then the name of the organizing institutes appears. For example, energy vertical of WebofSummit is being handled by IIT Bombay, IIT Madras and CSIR CECRI. Similarly, for computational sciences, the champion institutes are IIT Kharagpur, IIT Hyderabad, IISER Kolkata and CDAC. So there is no particular ministry or department organizing the complete WebofSummit, rather it has been delegated to various groups of institutions in our country. Let's now move on to the next news. This next news article, 10 patrolling points in eastern Ladakh blocked by Chinese, appears on page number 1. So as you know that the parliamentary session is going on and there are a lot of questions which are being answered by the government officials and ministers. So yesterday, Defence Minister Rajnath Singh had informed Rajya Sabha that face-offs with People Liberation Army happened, and the reason behind such face-offs was the interruption of the patrols. Now, according to this particular article, there are at least 10 patrolling points along line of actual control in eastern Ladakh that have been blocked by Chinese troops. These patrolling points, access to whom have been blocked by Chinese, are not concentrated in a particular region, but rather they span from Depsang Plains in the north to Pangong So Lake in the south. And in this regard, before anything, let us just revise the map locations. So as you can see, region of Ladakh shaded in peach color is Aksai Chin. And LAC passes through Depsang, Galwan Valley, Hot Spring region, Pangong So Lake, and finally it ends at Chumar. Now it is very, very important for you to keep in mind the north to south order of these locations. Depsang is the northernmost, Chumar is the southernmost, in between lies Galwan Valley, Hot Spring and Pangong So Lake. Now the question is, what are these patrolling points? Patrolling points are locations identified and marked on LAC, which are patrolled with predetermined frequency or stipulated frequency by our security forces. So as we know that there is a difference of opinion as far as LAC is concerned. Chinese perception of LAC is very, very different from what India perceives as LAC or line of actual control, and hence it is very, very important to demarcate our own perception. And that is why various locations have been designated as patrolling points which are marked and identified, and security forces regularly visit those locations. So there are around 65 patrolling points from the base of Karakoram to Chumar. So there are total 65 locations. A regular visit on them is ensured by India's security personnel on a regular basis. Now the question arises as to how to demarcate these patrolling points. Now for some of them it is very, very easy, because They are prominent and identifiable geographical features such as passes or nalas, and these are known by the name of the passes and the nalas, and there are no numerals which are allocated. Only those patrolling points where there are no prominent features are numbered. For example, the patrolling point in Galwan Valley is known by the name of PP14. And this news becomes important because, according to the statement given by our defense minister, access to 10 of these patrolling points out of 65 have been blocked by the Chinese. Now here you should also differentiate between the patrolling points and the posts or the chowkis along LOC. These patrolling points are not manned. You have to understand that they are just physical markers on the ground, chosen for their location and have no defensive potential or any other tactical importance for the army. So keep in mind these map locations as well as what are patrolling points. Bamboo shoots can be among cheapest immunity boosters appears on page number 11. So 18th September, that is yesterday, was World Bamboo Day. And hence in this regard, experts from 11 countries came together to highlight the nutraceutical properties of bamboo shoot. Now nutraceuticals are products which on one hand give nutrition, on the other they act as medicine or they have medicinal values. And nutraceuticals are often prescribed as a prevention to a disease. And the article which appears today in the newspaper is about experts from 11 countries claiming that the bamboo shoot could be amongst the cheapest immunity boosters for increasing the human body's resistance to viral attacks. And in the current context, obviously they want to focus on COVID-19 pandemic. Since the global actions to beat this pandemic are centered around two methods. First is to develop a vaccine, and the second is to boost immunity. And according to these groups of scientists, bamboo shoots, when taken in proper quantity, help in boosting the immunity of humans. So in this regard, let us discuss few of the points with respect to prelims examination. So first and foremost is that bamboo is not a tree, rather it is a grass, and it is the tallest grass. As we have seen, shoots are edible and they contain a lot of amino acids. Some of the bamboo shoots have been found to contain around 17 amino acids, of which 8 are essential for the human bodies. If we talk about the protein content in fresh bamboo shoots, it ranges anywhere between 1 to 4%, which is quite significant given the fact that bamboo shoots can be very cheap. As far as their environmental benefits are concerned, there are two of them. First and foremost is that since it is the fastest growing canopy, it releases 35% more oxygen than any other tree. Also, bamboo as a plant is very hardy. It can be planted to reclaim severely degraded sites and wastelands. Also, it is a good soil binder, which is attributed to its peculiar clump formation and fibrous root system, and hence also plays an important role in soil and water conservation. So far we have discussed health and environmental benefits of bamboo. Of course, economical benefits of bamboo are not difficult to think. Now you have to find out what are the economical uses of bamboo. So what the government of India is doing to promote bamboo. So first and foremost, we have National Bamboo Mission, which was launched by the government to promote the holistic growth of bamboo. Under this program, government has adopted area-based strategy. The government plans to increase the area under bamboo plantation. And this will be totally focused on non-forest government and private lands. This will help in supplementing the income of the farmer, as well as it will provide raw material for industries. Then the next objective of the government under National Bamboo Mission is to improve post-harvest management of bamboo, for which the government is providing incentives for establishment of primary processing plants as well as seasoning plants. Then the third objective of the government under National Bamboo Mission is to promote skill development in bamboo sector. And finally, the development of the products made out of bamboo is the fourth objective under National Bamboo Mission. So these were the four objectives of National Bamboo Mission. Next big step taken by the government to promote bamboo cultivation and production in our country is the declaration that any bamboo grown on non-forested area will not be considered a tree. Now you should not get confused between this declaration and whether or not bamboo is a tree or a grass. Biologically, bamboo is a grass, but legally all the bamboo grown on area which has been declared forest by the government will be considered a tree, whereas all those bamboo grown on non-forest area shall not be considered a tree. Now what difference will it lead to, you might ask? Now trees come under a lot of regulations. Their felling and transfer is not easy and requires a lot of licenses and permissions. And hence, declaration of bamboo grown on non-forested area as a non-tree has made felling and transfer of bamboo legally permissible. So these are the two steps which the government has taken in order to promote the bamboo sector in our country. Let's now move on to the next news. This next article on the GST issue, "The Center Holds the Baton," appears on page number 6 as a lead editorial. Now the issue of GST has come into limelight because of the states demanding their share of compensation cess which was promised to them by the center. And the center has refused to pay and has instead promised them loans from various sources on discounts. In this regard, we have already discussed this issue in DNS dated 6th of September 2020, which was an FAQ article, and it was taken up by our phenomenal Faizan sir, who had discussed in detail about center's delay in the payment of GST compensation to states. In this video, he had discussed about various dimensions which included mechanism of GST compensation, delay in payment of compensation, details about GST Council from the perspective of prelims examination. So it is highly advised that you go through this particular discussion. Now to do that, you just have to type RAU'S DNS 6 September 2020 in YouTube search box. You just have to click the first result you get after the search. Nonetheless, there are few things which we still need to discuss, and those are with respect to the trend of GST revenue collections. Now the first question arises in the mind is why we focus so much on the trends of revenue collection. And that is because in the past years, UPSC has asked similar questions. For example, in 2017, UPSC asked, consider the following statements. Statement 1, tax revenue as a percentage of GDP of India has steadily increased in last decade. Statement 2, fiscal deficit as a percent of GDP of India has steadily increased in the last decade. Now both these questions deal with the tax revenue as well as fiscal deficit, and it was expected of you to be aware of such trends. Before we go into the trends of GST data, let's solve this question. Now first statement is wrong. Tax revenue as a percentage of GDP has not increased, and that is one of the biggest causes of concerns for our policymakers. Second statement is also incorrect because fiscal deficit as a percentage of GDP has not steadily increased but instead has shown erratic behavior, and hence both these statements are incorrect, leading us to the right answer D, neither one nor two. Since in 2019 and 2020, GST compensation cess is in news a lot, let us now focus on the revenue trends of GST. As you can see, month-wise GST revenue has been plotted on the y-axis and the months have been plotted on x-axis. And as you can see that there is no particular trend which these revenue collections follow. So they have both increased as well as decreased in past 2 years, and hence there is no particular increasing or decreasing trend. So that is one aspect you should keep in mind. Next important thing which can be asked in UPSC examination is with respect to the components of the GST. You know that there are a lot of components, for example, central GST, state GST, integrated GST, and it is important for us to understand which one of them has the highest contribution to overall GST, and that is IGST. That is more than double of the next, which is the state GST, and at third comes CGST. So if I just write down the order, one more thing you should note from this particular graph is that all the components are stagnant as well. So the stagnancy in overall GST collection is contributed from each of the components of the GST. And when taken together, they have almost remained constant since last 2 to 3 years, and that is a big concern. Let's now move on to the next article.